Hello everyone, my name is Ben. I'm a principal backend engineer at Humanitec, and I'm excited to show you a couple of things you can do with Humanitec pipelines to enhance the way you deploy software. So in front of us today we've got the Humanitec UI, where we're going to create a new application. What's in the application doesn't really matter, but we're going to start with a demo application, a web app. I've already uploaded an image here, and we're going to set it up so we can access it over the internet. So to start with, we'll need a DNS name. We'll need to indicate what port the website is enabled on, and we'll link an ingress route between that DNS name and our port. Great, so we review and deploy it. Now, when I click deploy, you will see something new in Humanitec. We're going to be directed to the pipelines run page. And this shows everything that we're doing behind the scenes to deploy your environment. You can see we've converted the delta, the change set, into a new target deployment set. And we're now proceeding to deploy this. Now, these steps were things that Humanitec did previously, but we're now explicitly showing you what's going on. So you can look at the logs, you can see how it validates the environment, finding the delta, applying it to the deployment set, and then proceeds to deploy it. You can see now that we provide some view of the progress of the deployment. There's resource provisioning events that are visible. You can see that it's determined the cluster to deploy to, namespaces, it's provisioning our DNS name that we're looking for, and it's now monitoring the progress here. And once that DNS name has been hooked up, the deployment succeeds because those workloads have been pushed. Now, that's the default deployment pipeline that we provision for everyone by default, because this is what all deployments do behind the scenes. We can look at the definition of this, and you can see that there is a YAML definition, and it looks a lot like similar CI systems. There are 2 steps being defined here, and what we're going to do now is show you the first demo, which is making a custom deployment pipeline. In this example, we're going to be making sure that we check that our deployed workload actually works, and we're going to run some tests against it. So I have set up in GitHub, we've got a GitHub action called HTTP test, which does a curl command against a hostname, and we're going to use this to run some pseudo test suite. Imagine this is some complicated end-to-end smoke test or integration test setup. So we're going to copy this default deployment pipeline and create a new one. We will name it custom deploy pipeline, and we're going to add some more steps to the bottom. We want to keep our deployment happening, but the first thing we're going to do is wait for readiness. Now, normally in Humanitec, the resources are provisioned, the workloads are pushed to the remote cluster, and if that all goes well, the deployment is successful. But here we're actually going to wait until those Kubernetes deployments become ready and healthy, which validates a bit more that the pod and the image and everything is configured correctly. Now, this is only possible when Humanitec has a direct cluster connection. It doesn't work for GitOps and some of the operator modes, but for most cases this is usable. Then after that, we're going to call that GitHub action. To do that, you notice that it had a hostname that it needed to request, and we need to dynamically figure out what that hostname is, because the hostname we've been given by our platform engineering team, we don't know that up front. So we're going to look up the DNS resource that is linked to our workload in this environment, and we'll extract the hostname from that. And finally, we can run our test. So the third step we're adding is calling a GitHub workflow. We'll have put in my repo there. We know the branch. workflow name, and we're passing in the host value from our DNS resource. You can see we've got a GitHub token that we need to access, and so we'll add that into our application secrets before we try and run this. Now, we need to also indicate that this custom deploy pipeline is used by our development environment. So we can use matching criteria to define that. So here I'm going to just choose all development environments will use this custom pipeline. Oops. So let's add that GitHub token. I've prepared a token previously linked to that repo, and we can set it up there. So going back to our environment, let's look at how we might deploy this and test it. In this case, we're going to update the image. So I'm taking it to the container, and we're changing the version to version 2 of the image. We'll review and deploy that. Similar to previously, we've got the diff, but you'll notice now that it's linked to our custom deploy pipeline that will execute. And we can deploy that. So far it looks the same because it's starting with the same 2 steps, but you'll now see that it's waiting for readiness. Initially it sees that the pods are still pending, and after a few seconds when it retries again, everything's healthy. It's identified our DNS resource and looked that up, and now it's calling GitHub Actions with a new workflow run. You can see it's dumped out the URL that we're of the run, and it's called that, run our curl step, and it's showing our output out here. You can see that this host name is available on HTTPS, so Humanitec provisioned certificates and ingress is all correctly for us, and we can click on that and look at our little app. Great, and that was our test. So what we've achieved is a pipeline that runs a couple of tests against our deployment, and this will happen every time we deploy it.